Hello, everybody. Welcome back to the lineup. My name is Lily Dutay. I'm on the publicity team over here at Soho Press, and we have a very special horror edition of the lineup for you today. I'm going to take us through a little bit of the housekeeping stuff at first, and then I'm going to introduce the wonderful authors that we've got joining us today for our event. The lineup is typically a digital event series structured after giving some attention and some space to our crime titles over here at Soho Crime. Today, we're doing a special Halloween edition with our horror authors from our new horror imprint, Hell's 100. These events are always free to attend, and they're also archived. So if you have a friend who wasn't able to make it today, you can send them the same link that is up in your screen right now for the recorded version of this after the fact. A few more things. Today, if you ever have a question for any of our authors, you are more than willing or welcome to put it into the question box. It's like this little chat box on the right side of your screen with a question mark, and they will get to them at the end of the event. We've also got some special giveaway prizes at the end of this event. So just for signing up and attending, we will be giving away 2 gift cards and a Hell's 100 swag bag. So make sure you stay to the end to see if you've won, and we will email all of the winners after the fact. And besides that, we are really supported by Mystery to Me Bookstore, which is based in Madison, Wisconsin. So if you want to get your hands on any of the books that we've talked about today, it goes a long way to help the store by purchasing them directly from the bookstore, which you can do with that little green button there down at the bottom. And our authors have signed some book plates, so you'll be getting a very special signed copy of the book if you order from the event today. So without further ado, thank you again for joining us, especially if you have joined us for previous events. We've got some familiar faces in the crowd today and have come back for another event. We're really excited for our Halloween edition of the lineup. So without further ado, I am very excited to announce our moderator for today's event. We are joined by Dennis Mahoney, who is the author of Fellow Mortals, a Booklist Top 10 debut, Bellwether, an indie next pick, Ghost Love, and My Heart is Full of Blood. His new book, Our Winter Monster, will be out on Hell's 100 in January 2025. He lives in Troy, New York with his wife, son, and dog. Thank you, Dennis, for joining us.
Thank you, Lily. I'd like to thank Lily and Soho Press for putting this together and organizing the event. Hello to everyone joining us live and everyone watching the archive in the future. Also, thanks to Elizabeth and everyone at Mystery to Me Books in Madison, Wisconsin. If I ever get to Wisconsin, I will be sure to visit. We're going to begin with introducing E.K. Sathue. It's a pseudonym for the author Erin Mayer.
Mayer.
Mayer, a native New Yorker. She wrote her first haunted house story in Dr. Palladino's 3rd grade class and never looked back. Her work has appeared in a variety of publications, including Bustle, Travel and Leisure, Better Homes and Gardens, Literary Hub, Crime Reads, Business Insider, and Man Repeller. It's a good addition. She lives in Maine with her partner, Benjamin Perry, and their beloved haunted doll, Persephone. We also have Stuart Neville. The Guardian referred to him as the King of Belfast Noir. He's the author of 9 novels, including The Ghosts of Belfast, The House of Ashes, and Ratlines, as well as numerous short stories. Stuart has won the Los Angeles Times Book Prize and been shortlisted for the Edgar, McCavity, Dillis, Barry, and Anthony Awards, and the CWA Steel Dagger. He lives near Belfast. Thanks both to you for joining. It's so great to share the new horror imprint at Soho, Hell's 100 Books, edgy, hungry, putting out really interesting stuff these days. It's great to be with you guys and nice to talk about your books. I'm generally a pretty slow reader, and I ripped through both of yours. A total delight to read on both. And that's not to say either of them is an easy book or carefree by any means. Challenging stuff, but a total delight to read and hard to stop. Really, the ideal, I think, in a good novel is where there's actual meat on the bones, but it's still a pleasure to eat the thing. And I noticed there were a lot of similarities between your 2 books. I think I'm going to start with EK, and then I will bounce the same question over to Stuart. As different as these books are, actually, you know what? Let's begin by having you introduce your book. If you can describe something about it first, let's begin with EK, and then we'll go to Stuart, and then I'll ask the first question.
Yeah, so Youth Juice is a beauty satire horror novel about the wellness industry. So it takes place in the Soho neighborhood of New York City, mostly at a beauty company called Hebe, named after the Greek goddess of youth. And it follows this woman, Sophia, who gets a job there, and she starts, getting sucked into this very enigmatic world. She realizes pretty quickly that their new product, Youth Juice, works very well to sort of de-age and also just heal the skin of any impurities, quote unquote. And so she's kind of digging into what is the secret ingredient and how much is she willing to kind of sacrifice to be a part of this kind of glamorous world.
Great, thanks. And Stuart, Blood Like Mine. Actually, I should have held up. This is Youth Juice first. And here's Stuart's. All right. Both advanced reader copies, and I did not find errors. So, well done early on with Soho Press. Nothing jumped out. So, Blood Like Mine.
Yeah, I'll give you the elevator pitch, I guess. Blood Like Mine is about a woman called Rebecca Carter, originally from Madison, Wisconsin, as it happens. And she's been on the run for some years with her daughter, Moonflower, and staying out of sight, avoiding contact with anybody. But wherever they go, bodies are left behind. Always men, always with their throats cut, always bled out, always with their spinal cord severed. At the same time, there's an FBI agent called Mark Donner who's been tracking this killer for a couple of years now. And when he eventually catches up with Rebecca, he finds that she will do absolutely anything to protect her daughter, even if she's a monster.
Excellent. So in aiming for a natural conversation here, I'd like to get you both talking about questions that apply to both books. And one thing I noticed, not all horror novels are fundamentally blood-centric, but yours both happen to be. You can't tell either of these stories without blood being a really primary driving element in this. I would love to hear your thoughts. Let's begin with EK on blood. Blood being literally the stuff of life. Also metaphor for God knows, anything. And then it's something we all have, and also sometimes in dire circumstances, something that we take from others. Let's hear your thoughts on blood and how you swam in it as you were working on this book.
Yeah, I was really inspired by the actual, first of all, there's mythology around blood and bathing in blood as kind of the fountain of youth, like Elizabeth Bathory, the countess who was rumored to be the most prolific serial killer in history, or female serial killer, I forget which one, but was rumored to literally bathe in the blood of servants, young servants, to retain her own youth. But even in the modern day, there are so many actual treatments that involve platelets and kind of the use of your own blood to enrich your skincare, which that always just struck me as so delightfully gruesome. I worked as a beauty editor in online media for a number of years, so I kind of, the first germ of this idea really came from an event that I had heard about where editors got their blood drawn, and the company turned that into a moisturizer made with their own plasma and then sent it back to them. And this is a real treatment that you can buy, I think, that costs $1,500 or something.
Whoa.
For a brand that sells other high-end but less expensive creams. And then there's also for using a similar sort of principle, there's something called the vampire facial, which uses microneedling. They draw your blood and then they use a microneedling treatment to kind of puncture the skin and deliver your own blood back into your face, basically. Wow. And it's it's supposed to increase collagen. It's supposed to trigger kind of this reparative, structure of the skin and increase like the collagen and elastin and all this stuff that kind of keeps your face plump and dewy. And I just kind of loved how violent that is, like when you compare that to kind of the very glamorous world of like a Goop or a Glossier or like a very clean beauty, natural beauty kind of themed wellness company. There's just always something like dark kind of lurking under the surface of all of these like very glamorous industries. So I'm always really interested in kind of that intersection. And I think blood is so gross, but also like a little sexy. Like, I don't know. It's like, and especially when you get really like stylized with it, I think it's like gross, but it almost becomes something like not even human anymore. So I just had so much fun making it like grosser and bloodier.
That's a great answer. Yeah, it evokes powerful reaction in anybody. We were talking about getting blood drawn earlier. I don't do well with it. I think I'm better with other people's injuries than my own, which is terrible to say. But yeah, the sight of blood, it certainly does something. And like you said, so many of those healthcare industry moments, the number of animal testing things that have come out over the year, you're always killing something somewhere to make more life, which I suppose is a great transition to Stuart's book. The blood there is... I don't know how much you're going to want to discuss certain secrets in your book, but there's certainly blood as survival, which is similar to EK's book, The Fountain of Youth, and that vital energy that exists in the fluids of other people. If you want to talk about that at all?
Well, yeah, I was struck when EK was talking there on that process, the skin pricking thing, how ritualistic that sounds as well.
Mm.
You know, it's the talk about skincare rituals and so on, and image wise, I'm starting getting images of people in sort of black cloaks standing in the background when somebody's getting their beauty treatment done. But yeah, I mean, the blood in the title of this book, I've actually been resistant to having blood in the title of the book, really through my career, because in crime fiction, it's a little bit of a cliche having blood in the title. But when we were reaching around for a title for this book, I initially just called it Moonflower after the girl who's one of the lead characters. But we weren't settled on that, and then I had the title of American Blood. Then we weren't keen on that. Then Blood Like Mine was what we wound up with. I hesitant to go too far into why blood is so vital to this book. A bit spoilery, but it has a double meaning as well, because the book is very much about family.
Right.
It's about parenthood, and so the blood like mine takes on a double meaning there. And there is a moment in the book where where Rebecca actually voices that out loud, that it is about blood like mine, blood like our own. And so yeah, it's the deeper theme of the book, I think, is about what you'll do for love, and love of a child, and again, terrible cliche, blood being thicker than water and all that. And yeah, so it has all sorts of meanings in all sorts of ways, and also the imagery of it, both in crime fiction and horror fiction, is so intrinsic. You'd be hard pushed to find a horror movie poster with at least a bit of a splash of blood on it.
Yep. Yeah, they added some to my cover because it wasn't bloody enough. I'm going to skip a couple of questions. Actually, I had a certain flow, but it's something you said, and I'm going to stick with Stuart a bit and then bounce it back to EK. You were talking about blood being a cliche in a title. It's used so often. So much of this is, again, without giving away anything in your story, but EK has already mentioned how she was drawing on the old Countess Bathory legend and even Greek myth. These ancient stories we're telling, you're both really approaching stories that have been told forever and telling them in a modern setting in a new way. I'm wondering why you think it's valuable or engaging for, I suppose, first for yourself and then ultimately for readers to revisit these things that we have in fact visited a million times before. We all keep telling the same stories, nothing new under the sun. Every time you see a new movie or a new book, there's some kernel that we've seen before. Did you personally learn anything by revisiting the type of story that you told by telling it in a new way and making it your own? Because it's very much your own version, Stuart, of this story.
Yeah, I mean, it's very hard to discuss this without spoiling what the thing actually is.
Yeah.
This particular subgenre of horror, there is one book that everybody knows that's kind of the genesis of it all, even though it was actually ripped off another book.
Yeah, I don't want to back you into a corner. If you want me to rephrase the question, if you want to, maybe talking just in general, you may have faced this with books before that you've written. I mean, you write in the crime genre primarily.
Yeah.
We've seen crime stories before. I'm sure you're approaching the obstacle of how do I write something fresh and new and true while honoring the convention but not bowing to it. So you're telling old stories, a person killing another person, someone stealing from someone else, someone on the run, if we want to just focus on that, mother-daughter running from something and learning things. I suppose maybe what is useful about the genre approach to these stories that we know, and how can you play with those stories that way?
In the instance of this particular story, it is coming at a very well trodden subgenre. But the thing for me was trying to establish what would this actually look like if it was actually a thing in the real world, and trying to ground it as much as possible.
Mm-hmm.
Not on a scientific basis or anything. The book doesn't try to explain anything in that regard, but just what would it be like to actually live with this and to survive with this.
Mm-hmm.
And I was thinking it through, and I thought it must be an absolutely wretched existence. And Rebecca and Moonflower are kind of cursed to be kind of outcasts, and the only way they can survive is to exist outside of society. And I think if I don't want to flatter myself to say this in any way an original take on the thing, but my take on the thing was, what does this actually look like? What does this actually feel like? How does this actually function?
Mm-hmm.
If these were real people in the real world. And it was quite good fun to kind of tell the story and make everything function within the boundaries that most of us already know for that kind of story, but finding a way that actually presents in a grounded way.
Mm-hmm.
If that makes sense. Again, I can't go into detail without giving too much away, but there's
totally
one
worked on
chapter.
that level.
There's one chapter that's actually just a set of rules that Rebecca explains in her journal entries, and that's where I kind of set the rules for myself for the story that then everything has to function within. But all of those rules function within what everybody understands as being the nature of this particular kind of story.
I did notice in your book there's one word that you never use. The one most identifying word. And about 2/3 of the way through, I'm like, oh, this is on purpose. It's never being mentioned. And that was a new way in, just simply by eliminating everybody's preconception and the baggage that comes with certain terms. You just ducked that. So I'll move over to EK and ask a similar question. I'm trying to think of where we began with this. I guess, what was my question? Ancient stories in a modern setting, or the other angle would be, how do you even use the conventional rules of the genre to do something new? Either way, we're taking something that's very familiar. We've grown up with it. I mean, the minute we start encountering stories, we're encountering stories like this. And now here you are as an artist, and you're trying to there's a reason for this new book to exist. And there was a reason for you to spend a year or two on it. That's a lot of time. What are the opportunities that you met, or how did that experience change you?
Yeah, I feel like it really, because I started with like such a clear image, kind of just like, I mean, perhaps is a little spoilery, but it's like that woman bathing in blood that I talked about kind of before. And like that was really the start of it for me. Like it came from this like almost this like yeah, this sort of ancient story, this Elizabeth Bathory story, but I was already kind of like thinking about it in a modern setting and like and I was kind of wondering like, well, what am I trying like why is this appealing to me? Like I almost didn't know at first like all the stuff about the vampire facial and all this stuff. Like it's like that kind of stuff came to me like in different pieces, I think. Like I'm not really like an outliner, so there was a lot of like, okay, I wrote like 5,000 words, like what the hell, what the hell am I
Yeah.
talking about, you know? And I kind of had to keep like distilling it down. So I think that's like the thing that was so useful for me about these different markers, like kind of the Elizabeth Bathory myth, the Greek goddess imagery, like just these different root inspirations that I could kind of pair it back to when I was like really unsure of, you know, what am I doing with this story and like feeling like maybe I had too many elements. And another big one for me was American Psycho, which is like directly comped on the back copy of the book, but also like was really a kind of guiding light for me at a certain point in the process, but not as early as like these other markers. Like I think that was something that really helped me, I think, clarify for myself like the characters and kind of like, you know, I was bouncing up against something that was very familiar to me, but I was like, well, I clearly want to make this different. And I was like, well, I'm not trying to make it like a literal one-to-one, like what would a female Patrick Bateman be like, but I was kind of trying to take this main character I had and just be like, think about how in American Psycho, what I was always kind of really drawn to is this simmering rage, this like kind of like the rage of conformity, which I think is like a very similar thing to what I'm trying to play with my character Sophia, where she's like super angry, super like average in a lot of ways, and she's both like furious that she can't quite access this world that she wants to access, but also like willing to do whatever it takes to kind of even brush the surface of this world. And so I just think these inspirations for me and these places that I can kind of research and really dig in, like spent a lot of time on like, I don't know, skincare addiction Reddit, just kind of like really absorbing these narratives that people tell and always filtering them back to these sort of guiding images and influences in a way that isn't a constraint that helps you figure out what you're saying, if that
Yeah,
makes sense.
it does. I'm wondering when we've just come dangerously close to the most dreaded question authors get, which is where do you get your ideas? And of course, I think generally every author says, I don't. It's like, wait, where did you get your weird dream last night? No idea. Did both of you write this? Just a quick pre-question. Were you writing these books during lockdown, during the pandemic? Would that the timing be right there, or had you escaped? Had we made it to the other side?
I started mine like literally during, it must have
Okay.
been like the first month or something that we were at home.
And Stuart?
I think it was right at the tail end
Okay.
or you know, just as things were beginning to kind of open up, and the book does make reference to the pandemic
Oh, right. Yeah, it does.
on
Okay.
occasion. It's set just after it, but it was I'd found I don't know how you guys found it, but I found the pandemic very disruptive to me to be able to write because I have school age kids and
Oh, right.
uh, because my wife was classed as an essential worker, I was at home with the kids, so I was doing
Oh,
the
yeah.
homeschooling by myself every day, and so you know, spending however many hours a day doing times tables with my kids,
Right.
I didn't feel like doing more homework.
Yeah.
You know, so it really kind of threw me off in terms of writing and the timing and being able to get things done. I think at least that's my excuse.
Yeah. That no, yeah, a completely crazy time for everybody. The reason I brought it up, I suppose, was a little thing EK said. Another thing I noticed about both of your books, and I'm not sure if maybe the pandemic mentality was with us. I think we're all still a little PTSD about this. Sophia is desperately trying to enter a world and a community that she feels like she's on the outside of. Rebecca and Moonflower are longing for that world that they must flee. And they're going in the opposite directions, but they both have this thing they want. And it was ringing bells as I'm reading it. I'm sort of feeling like I remember that vision of the dream life of not pandemic, the dream life of being in the flow of ordinary life and being around people. Do you think that crept into your work at all, or do you want to talk about that escape or running too? Want to start with Stuart?
It wasn't something conscious, but now that you say that, there are a lot of moments in Bud Like Mine where, there's a longing for the ordinary world, like the banal stuff, like Rebecca just being able to have a shower,
Yeah.
Moonflower being able to watch TV, just the normal things that the creative, I guess, in the way that we did for a couple of years, craving just be able to go to a supermarket without it being a whole process, just how much. I think I was shocked, like everybody, how much we missed all those really small, ordinary, boring things that we couldn't do anymore. So yeah, there's a lot of that in the book, and I hadn't made the sort of connection in my head, but I guess it must have played in
Well,
there
even
somewhere.
in your case, you love your kids like Rebecca does, but man, you've been stuck in the van for a year now. You'd love to. Moonflower wanted to talk to another kid, wanted to talk to
Yeah,
another adolescent. I imagine your children. We had a son he missed senior year of high school, and we had one kid that came into the pod, and he was allowed in. We had agreed with the other family, but he lost that whole socializing thing. So I was certainly seeing it in the mother-daughter relationship there. Just they love each other, but my God, I've been with mom for a really long time. And
yeah,
so EK, you've got your character who it feels like she's on the outside, and wants to get in and wants to be part of this, for better or worse. Another thing I noticed about the pandemic is once we kind of got back to the world, it wasn't as good as we hoped. It was like, oh, right, all of our problems are still here. I'm still confronted with myself in this world. It didn't fix everything that we got vaccinations. We back to talking to the lousy neighbors and the difficult job.
Yeah, I'm remembering actually like completely forgot that I did kind of feel like it was like hard for me to remember when I was like writing the book. Like, how is like life, like what is life? It was like, how do you go? Like, how was life? Did we go?
Yeah.
How did we talk to people? So I kind of wonder, like, it definitely wasn't conscious, but I do wonder if there was a little bit of that because I think there's definitely like a very surreal kind of uncanny quality to Sophia's interactions with other people. Like it's just so absurdist and like just saying just absolutely insane thing. Like, and there's a lot of like talking past each other. Like one person will just say, I can't really think of an example, but someone will just say something so ridiculous, and the other person won't really respond, or they'll like respond kind of talking past her, and that's sort of a little bit how I felt all the time in that kind of like fashion beauty world, because I like a lot of it is just how I felt, like a kind of a fish out of water in those situations, kind of this weird person who actually wanted to write really weird books, but also likes clothes and lip balm and stuff. And so I kind of felt like I had this like weird double life. So I think some of that went in there for sure. But I feel like there were times when I was like trying to remember, like, what does a party feel like? And I think that part of the reason why there is a very strange kind of surreal quality to some of these socializing scenes is that I was trying to like reconstruct them for myself for like a lot of the writing process for this. And then I think, it is a little bit just how I write too, where it's like I just think that she is a really strange person. So she's not relating to the world maybe the way a quote unquote normal person would. But I do think it was definitely there a little bit for me while I was working on this. Like that feeling of like being in my apartment, looking outside, being like, I could technically leave my apartment right now, but like I also feel like I can't. And what does that feel? What is that tension?
Yeah. Yeah, loneliness was another theme I found in both of your books. But in a way, I think we've covered that. I sort of stumbled into it. But yeah, the profound loneliness from your main characters. In Stuart's Agent Donner, increasingly just losing people. And kind of by choice. A lot of these characters, Sophia's the same way in Youth Juice. As lonely as they are in the beginning of the book, you can see them getting increasingly distant from any kind of meaningful contact aside from what they had. Sophia pushes away a lot of people one way or another, loses a lot of people in the flashbacks and in current, and Rebecca as well. In Rebecca's flashback moments, or in the letters that she had left for Moonflower, you see that she has had to consciously walk away from a number of important connections in her life because they each get Sophia and Rebecca, they get very single-minded on their goal. I mean, I suppose loneliness is something we can all relate to as writers as well. It's a weird, long, quiet job in your head. There's a lot of pleasure to be had there, but Stuart, do you have good feelings, bad feelings? I mean, you're stuck with yourself a lot writing books. Do you enjoy it?
Yeah, I mean, I've always been quite content in my own company. I remember my wife commenting quite early on in our relationship that I had an ability to just sit there in my own head for a very long stretch. I think we were traveling somewhere on a train journey, and my wife had to have a book to read and all this sort of stuff. And I just had content just to sit there with stuff bubbling inside my head. And I think I don't know if that's common to all writers that were able to just kind of exist within their own minds, or if that's a requirement to be a writer. But at the same time, I do think writers are a weird mix of introvert and extrovert
Mm-hmm.
because we spend all this time on our own because we like being on our own, writing a story that we then want other people to tell us is good. We're doing
Yeah, right.
spending a lot of time. Yeah, this contradiction, spending all this time on your own to do a thing that you want to share with other people.
Right.
And I enjoy going to the various book festivals that I get to go to. I'm just this past weekend at a festival in Dublin, and it's at BoucherCon States. I've done a lot of stuff, and I enjoy meeting other writers and meeting readers. But at the same time, I enjoy just going and hiding and not seeing people.
Yeah. Yeah, I think we're all going to be incredibly exhausted after this hour has passed. Now, it's not necessarily our natural environment. I think we can't wait to just be back with our computer and like, okay, I can rest now. It is hard. Most of our performance is done silently with no one looking, and then you finally put something out a year and a half later. And how about you, EK? You enjoy your time alone, or do you start crawling up the walls at a certain phase?
I feel like it's kind of interesting because I do feel like a loner a lot of the time. Like I kind of feel like I remove myself. Like I love to be just like in a room in my house and like hear the other people I live with like doing stuff. Or like if we have friends over and I just hit my introvert wall and I'm like, I need to go upstairs, and I can just like still hear the like party downstairs or whatever. Like that's my favorite mode. Which I do feel like is reflected a lot in my writing, but I feel like it's interesting because it comes out, I think, with my characters a lot as like this intense loneliness that I'm not necessarily experiencing all the time in my experience of that. Like I like to be by myself. And sometimes I feel like the actual writing process can be like a little mini hell for me because I'm such a perfectionist, and it's really hard for me to be in that phase where it's like not really good, and I feel like it's not good until like very late in the process.
Yeah.
So I feel like when I'm in that like drafting zone, I wish I had more fun with the imagining. I mean, I do like to imagine my stories, but I feel like once I start getting in the middle of like the draft, that's when I'm like, I don't want to be by myself. I'm looking for like any excuse to not be like looking at my computer. Mm-hmm. But it's also like you need to keep returning to it. So it's kind of like a weird loop where I have such a compulsion to do it. It's like I'm not going to stop writing. I'm always going to end up like back there, even if it's like really challenging. So I think in some ways, yeah, that is kind of like the central tension for me, because it's like I always want to be alone, but then I get to be alone and I'm like, oh no, what have I done?
It kind of sounds like the pandemic again, which was kind of good for people, I guess, in a way. We get to hide. I don't mean it was a terrible thing, but I've always had the Shawshank Redemption fantasy in my head. I have this weird obsession with prison movies and movies where people are stuck on a ship, or The Thing, where they're. I don't want to actually be on a ship or stuck in a prison. But I'm like, God, wouldn't it be great to just like have that quiet routine that you just know is going to go on for a while? And I'm sure I would hate it if I were actually in it. But that fantasy of that bubble where all of that noise stops for a little while, and you are forced to be with yourself, for better or worse. Stuart apparently has an easy time with it. He can drop into it in the train. But for some people, yeah, there's so much noise in the modern world. It's good to go hide in a book, whether you're reading or writing. 236. I want to encourage anybody who's listening, if you have questions for the authors, we are collecting them off to the side in a little Q&A. I think there should be a question mark. If anyone wants to add something, we will have about 10 minutes at the end, and I can ask those questions. Continuing onward, I'm beginning to run out of questions, so we might just need to kind of wing it here. I've got no real good segue here, except to say another thing I noticed between your two books is the theme of predator and prey. And let's begin with Stuart. Again, if you can discuss this. I was really struck by one line, and I won't read it out loud here, but there was a line that hits pretty late in the book, maybe 4/5 of the way through, where you draw a pretty strong parallel between who we've been perceiving as the predator and who we've been perceiving as the prey, and how they're quite a bit closer than we thought, that they're doing the best with certain urges that they have. And there's the question of who deserves it. Moonflower is often being told it's not her fault. Rebecca has fallen into this. She didn't ask for this either. And there are certain other characters, I would even say Agent Donner with his personal struggles, has things in him that he can't quite control. There was a reason he got to the point he got. He was built this way, and he's also making those choices. So I'm wondering, in the predator and prey angle, was that a huge early driver for Blood Like Mine? That idea, or did that emerge as you were getting to know these people?
It kind of emerged as a function of the story, but it's something I've done before in my books. Taking if we take a predator and prey, I would take the idea of sort of hero and villain, if you like. Um, I quite enjoy inverting those roles sometimes. In my first book, The Ghost of Belfast, it's about it's you could call it horror as well. Actually, it's got a strong supernatural element. Where the premise of that book is a former killer released from prison, but he's haunted by the ghosts of his victims, and essentially goes on a killing spree, killing all the people who gave him orders to kill. And there's an undercover soldier who's kind of deep inside a paramilitary group, who's tasked with stopping and bringing him down. And in any conventional story, the killer would be the villain, and the authority figure that's trying to stop him would be the hero. But the arc of the story, kind of the two kind of cross. There's a very clear point where the guy who's trying to stop the killer becomes clearly a villain. He crosses a line. So I've always enjoyed that kind of ambiguity, and I think Blood Like Mine does that as well, where conventionally Rebecca should be the villain of this story, because she's doing the one primarily doing the killing. That's no spoilers, established early in the book. And Donner should theoretically be the hero because he's the one trying to stop her and catch her. But really, Donner performs the role of the antagonist in this book. I won't go as far as to say villain, because he does have at the root of it, at least it appears to be an honourable reason for doing this. He wants to stop murders happening, but he's actually doing it out of pride. He's I should say the people that have been targeted and that have been killed throughout the book are themselves online predators that Rebecca has been
Right.
catfishing to bring them in, and this is kind of her moral code that they're the ones who deserve what's going to happen to them. But Donner's job within the FBI has been doing this as well, tracking down these online predators, and it drives him nuts that somebody out there is doing something that he can't.
Right.
And that's really what drives him through the story.
Yeah.
But it's also why he's obsessed with it and why he winds up being, for better or worse, filling that role of the villain in the story. But yeah, I quite enjoy playing with that,
Yeah.
and I like the moral grey areas and things that I've always done with crime novels, and yeah, this is just a continuation of that.
Great. And EK, you've certainly got a predator prey. Similar situation where the lines get very muddy. You think of one person as a victim or maybe as deserving of something, and things do get flipped. Sophia's complicated. You're thinking one way about her, and then you're not. And she makes some pretty big choices and turns. Third of the way through, halfway through. It's a good way into the book where all of a sudden you go, oh, wow. And of course, the flashback reveal of like, oh, she made that choice. That major choice all those years ago, it begins to obviously inform where she's going next. Yeah, so your complex reaction to her, writing somebody who's certainly not a clear cut either way.
Yeah, I feel like that was really fun because like she's kind of a villain, but she's kind of a victim. And I think that was it was like an explicit choice to kind of talk about the power structures in sort of mostly in the corporate realm, but also just sort of in this like sort of white feminism like gauntlet of like who's gonna get the most, who's gonna basically win capitalism and be like the most powerful girl boss to ever girl boss. That's basically so she is very like cunning in some ways, and I think that often I really tried to sort of play with like your sympathies on purpose there, and just to think about the ways that we can sometimes view ourselves as victims so intensely that it actually kind of makes us villains, like in the end. Like, I don't know, that's just something I personally feel like I'm always working on in therapy or whatever. Like, not to victimize myself so much that I think that I don't have any agency. Like, I think that's kind of what I really wanted to play with Sophia, where it's like she definitely makes conscious choices. Like, she's not like a super passive person, but I think she presents herself as like passive in a lot of ways. Like, she's just like, oh, I'm not as privileged as my coworkers, so I'm just gotta do what I gotta do. But it's also like, did you have to do that though? Like, there's a few times where you're like,
yeah, she definitely makes turns where it's not,
yeah,
whoops, I mean, she makes a choice.
Yeah. And I do think at certain points, maybe in certain drafts, she was a bit more passive, and I really kept trying to like ratchet that up. And with like Dennis and I have the same editor, with the help of our editor, I was really like working on that too, because I feel like it is a little bit my tendency sometimes to have that character, to have there really be like a tension between like, will they make a choice? Will they not make a choice? And I think that is present in this, but I wanted her to start making choices a little bit sooner so we could kind of really see like, okay, this is who we're working with. But I do think she is really complicated. Like, she's not, I made the Patrick Bateman comparison before, and I do think it's apt, but like, it's also, she's just not a clear-cut villain in the same sense. Like, you're not going to be like, oh, she's 100% evil. I don't think. Maybe some people will.
He's a lot less complicated.
Yeah.
You're given easier time calling Bateman a villain early.
Yeah.
Sort of
and
like how bad will he be?
And I feel like I have said that she's like a bad person to people who've read the book and they've been this. I've had people be like, really? Oh, I thought she was kind of like sympathetic and sad. My mom, I'm calling my mom out. My mom was like, this is such a sad book. She's so sad.
All right, we've got 15 minutes left. Not getting any questions yet, so I think we're just going to keep going. I think off of your books, I would say, what are we working on now? What have you got going next? I'm interested to see where you head after this. Let's start with Stuart. This was a rare foray for you into horror in a way. Are you off it and back to something different?
No, I've just delivered the sequel to Blood Like Mine.
Oh, you're kidding. I didn't know that was
Yeah.
happening.
Yeah, it's hopefully going to be a trilogy.
Oh,
And it's cunningly titled Blood Like Ours. Um,
perfect.
I see if you can guess what the third book's going to be called. But yeah, I got to the end of Blood Like Mine, and the very last page ends not a cliffhanger, but there's kind of a reveal on the last page that opens the
Yeah.
door. And there's a conversation that happens. There's a character in the book called the Nurse,
Mm.
Guthrie Chambers, who helps people like Rebecca and Moonflower, because he has a sympathy for them, because of his own family history. And he has a conversation with Moonflower where he tells her that he knows other people like her, and most of them don't want to do what they do. They don't want to be like this.
Mhm.
It fell upon them, but there are people who do like what they do and who do like being what they are. And I'd left it open for myself that there was a larger world that Moonflower exists within to explore. So that's what Blood Like Ours begins to do. And uh, we just said Moonflower falls into some bad company in the second book,
Mhm.
and it's similar in style and so on, but it opens out this world and leaves scope then in the third book, I think, to see a bit more of it again. And I'm just at the moment debating whether there's even more to do within this world beyond the three books. So that's really what I'm thinking about at the
Oh,
minute. And
wow. Oh, that's
so
great news.
yeah.
I love it. And Aaron, are you EK? Are you willing to share what you're working on? Not everybody is.
Yeah, no, I am willing to share. I don't have anything like official. Like Stuart is very like sounds very locked in on the future plans, but I'm working on a couple things in various stages. So I have sort of like a Frankenstein inspired project that is set in the art world, also in New York. So again, another like glamorous, this is my thing, I guess. Glamorous world, weird, gross stuff, like meeting in the middle. Because my next, I'm sort of in like okay, like pausing on that, seeing what else it needs phase. But I'm also working on a ballet project, like a ballet inspired. And I'm setting that where I live, which is in Mid Coast, Maine. So I'm trying to do like a very different setting, a swing for a different setting, because I've only really written stuff that takes place in New York City. So I'm kind of like craving a little bit of a scene change. And I really love ballet. I used to be a dancer, not like a super serious ballerina, but I used to do like modern and stuff. And so I just think ballet there's such fertile ground for like body horror and gross things and ritual. Like we were talked a little bit about ritual before, and I feel like there's definitely a lot of room to play with that. So yeah, I'm kind of still going in that direction of these very sort of glamorous, kind of sealed off worlds and the potential gross, violent things that can happen within them.
Yeah, peel the skin off that a little. All right.
Yeah.
And then how about horror either of you has liked lately? Books or movies, but any books or authors that are really becoming a thing for you lately in this genre? And if not current, what favorites all time?
Just because I got it sitting here beside me, very recently, oops,
Oh yeah, I
Bino
got it.
Iglesias.
Yep.
I loved his last book, and this is good as well. I always, as a reader, I always like distinctive voices. Well, no matter what the genre, it's the thing that always gets me, his voice, and I think Cabino has that in spades. Um, but within horror fiction, I grew up in the 80s, so obviously I read Stephen King.
Yeah.
Um, my kids are now starting to discover those books. My 11-year-old son is begging me to read Misery.
Great.
And I keep trying to, maybe not yet.
You
but,
know,
but then I think I read The Shining when it was his age, so it might be a little bit hypocritical of me.
somewhere here, this is the Creature double feature logo. I don't know if you can see it, but
Just
that was
about.
every Saturday morning. It was 11 Alive, the Pix 11 channel out of New York City, and we get it fed up 3 hours north into our cable system. They would run stuff like Godzilla or whatever. So I'm like 8 years old, 9 years old. It's Saturday morning cartoon hour, and it was usually safe ones, but there were a few that, like, while strictly PG at 10 a.m. in the morning, had stuff that absolutely impacted me forever, and I think that's why I'm sitting here now. So your children may be at that age where they're about to be permanently marked, maybe in a good way.
So my daughter is a little bit older, and she's really getting into horror.
Yeah.
I've been really enjoying sitting down with her and watching very specific movies. We watched like Halloween and things like that. And we watched Blair Witch Project. She absolutely loved.
Oh,
She
yeah.
now says that's her favorite movie. But like when I was a kid, I don't know what American TV was like, but it used to be here on a Friday night on BBC Two. They'd have a horror double bill, and we used to be allowed to stay up late. My very irresponsible mother used to let us stay up late on a Friday night and watch the bill. And there'd always be like a Universal monster picture. So it'd be like Bride of Dracula or The Wolfman or something like that, one of those black and white things. And then there'd be a Hammer film afterwards.
Oh, Hammer. Yeah.
So the Hammer film would be the one that would really test your resolve. Because I
Yeah.
remember there was one, Zoltan Hound of Dracula.
Uh-huh.
I remember managing 5 minutes that and just running from the room.
Christopher Lee, I assume, was in that.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
I'm not sure he was, but there was a very big dog. Was
Big dog. Okay. Yeah, that one I don't remember. It's one of the few Hammer I can't come up with. Probably Peter Cushing was in it. If it wasn't Christopher Lee, it was the other one. And how about you, Aaron? What are you into these days?
Yeah, I feel like, I mean, all-time favorite is Shirley Jackson for books. That's like not a very original answer, but I just feel like I just need, I read like The Lottery when I was in high school before I really read any horror, and that just was like, I didn't know you could do things like this. But I love Mariana Enriquez. I have
Yes.
yeah. So I know she has a new collection that I have not gotten my hands on yet, but I love her short stories and her novel that's translated Our Share of Night.
That thing was unbelievable.
Yeah, so she's fantastic, and she's probably one of my all-time favorites, but like a newer all-time favorite. And I haven't seen it yet, but everyone is telling me that I need to see The Substance with Demi Moore.
Yeah, you're right. Yep.
Like literally, I don't know. I mean, I have really been avoiding spoilers, but like I think it's very similar to Youth Juice in a lot of ways. I keep getting tagged in like Instagram posts, like books like The Substance, and I'm like, I guess I need to watch this movie. But I missed it in theaters, so I need to like wait because in Maine there's like, I don't know, we get movies for like 2 minutes, so I need to figure out when I can see that. But my favorite recent release that I have seen is Longlegs. I was a big Longlegs fan, so
I still haven't seen that one.
Yeah. It's
rentable now, so I can finally get it. Yeah, we watched Maxine finally the other day, rounding out the X trilogy. It was as good as I hoped. It's a blast.
Did you mention Shirley Jackson there? A couple of Christmases ago, my wife bought me this.
Yeah.
Graphic novel adaptation.
Oh my god.
Well, yeah, I've never read that.
Miles Hyman, I presume, must have done the art as well, or did the art. Yeah, but it's a really nice sort of rendering of the story. For anybody who's fans, I'm a fan of Shirley Jackson as well. But yeah, look out for that if you can find it.
Yeah, we all have a lottery story. I want to say 12, and I came home one day and my mother handed me the musty library book, and she just said, "Oh, read this." And I sat down and I read it, and it was the lottery, and I had the reaction everyone has. I say within an hour of reading that story, I answered the phone call from my grandmother to tell us that my grandfather had died, and that was the first major family death I had encountered. But I was the one that picked up the phone to her crying, and that was within an hour of reading the lottery. So you talk about a day that marked me. I smell an old library book now, and it's in there somewhere. That whole little constellation of events. Not to be total downer about that, but yeah, everybody has that lottery moment, and I read a bunch of her other ones recently, like a lot of her non-horror stuff that's in those collections, and they're just fantastic. You can't believe what she's doing.
She's so good. Yeah, I have like this is the one that I got. It was like my mom's best friend, who was a big reader, gave this to me when I was a teenager, and like I didn't know who Shirley Jackson was, so like this cover is so like unassuming. I mean, it's really sinister. Like now I realize it's really sinister, but at the time I was like, it's an old lady holding a purse. Like what? I just had no idea like what this was. So when I read the whole thing, and I think the lottery might be not the last, it might be the last story. It is.
I love that you both had copies within arm's reach.
Yeah, I know. They're like literally all.
Yeah, no one left the room. It's like
every horror author has to have the lottery within arm's reach at all times.
Here, this is my contribution.
Yes.
There you go. All right, there's Lily.
Thank you guys so much. And Dennis, thank you again for hosting today. We said it a little bit at the beginning. Dennis has got a book coming out in January called Our Winter Monster. That is just wonderful. So thank you for hosting this conversation. Stuart and EK. Yes, exactly.
Thank you, Stuart.
Stuart and EK, thank you. We love doing spooky events like this just in time for Halloween. So thank you for your expertise. I am here, of course, to announce the winners of our gift cards today. So thank you again for tuning in. For our first prize, we have a $25 gift card, and the winner is Melissa Thompson. So thank you, Melissa. Round of applause. Thanks. Elizabeth Walsh and I will email you after this event with the information about the gift cards. So hold tight there. Our next $25 gift card is going to Alan Taylor. Congratulations. Thanks, Alan, for joining. And then our grand prize, which is a Hell's 100 swag bag, which also comes with a Mystery to Me gift card and an ARC of Dennis's book, amongst other goodies, is Peggy H. So congrats, Peggy. Thank you.
Congrats.
And yes, just thank you so much. If you are interested in any of these books, again, we cannot stress enough how much buying the books from Mystery to Me helps keep the series going. They're wonderfully signed by the authors, and it's just in time for spooky season. So thank you all for joining us this afternoon. We had a great time. Dennis, thank you. EK, Stuart, thank you so much for taking time out of your schedules. And we will see you next month for our final event of the year. It's going to be a Hanukkah noir collection conversation with Todd Goldberg about his new anthology of dark Hanukkah stories. So we'll see you next month. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, Lily.